Привет, друзья! Welcome back to Be Fluent in Russian show. This is our third episode, and I hope that you're enjoying these episodes and you don't feel as lonely going through your Russian learning. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I read all the comments and I select one question from the comments to answer in this series. So the question for today: are there any lesser known Russian holidays or traditions that most foreigners probably haven't heard of? Yes, a ton, probably. I want to mention two traditions that we have in Russia. There's, of course, a ton more, but two that came to me the quickest. Number one is you don't celebrate the birthday before your actual birthday date. So let's say my birthday was May 30th, and that was conveniently Friday this year. I can never celebrate it on a Thursday 29th or Wednesday 28th. It doesn't matter. Let's say your birthday falls on a Monday. You celebrate it the next Saturday or the next Friday, the next weekend. You can never do it before. It's just bad luck. It's believed that if you do celebrate it earlier, then your actual birthday may never come. So you will die before your birthday. So you don't do it at all. You don't say happy upcoming birthday. Like for example, we say с наступающим Новым годом, happy upcoming New Year. We don't say с наступающим днем рождения. Never. Happy upcoming birthday. We don't ever say that. So it's a sign of bad luck. That's one thing that a lot of foreigners don't know. And the second tradition that I want to mention is that every family has their own traditions. For example, in my family, and I'm sure that this is the same for a lot of other families too. For me and for my siblings, блинчики, like pancakes, оладьи, also like more thicker pancakes, and сырники, cottage cheese cakes, is once in a month, once in 2 months kind of a meal. This is when my parents want to spoil us a little bit. This is like a celebratory breakfast. We don't do it regularly. And we typically have like eggs and things like that. So for our family, these 3 meals is something that my parents make on a special occasion, okay? And then we also have another tradition within my family is that on Saturdays, my whole family, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, come to our house for a banya. Right here is a banya. Banya is like a version of a sauna in Russia. And they all come to us on a Saturday and we all sit around the table, we talk, we maybe grill some meat and things like that. So the second point that I wanted to make with this question is that each family has their own traditions, however small, whether that's the way we celebrate a certain day, the food that we eat, or gathering around on a certain day. And so it doesn't really, there's no universal rule for when you're supposed to do what. You kind of develop your own traditions, which I really, really like about Russian families because there's always something unique about each of them. That is all. Now let's move on to the topic for today, the cultural topic that we're going to discuss today. And the topic is education. Education in Russia is a big, big thing, and all kids go through the same exact educational steps. And it was a big surprise to me when, let's say, I asked my American friends, hey, when you go to school, what age do you go to school at? And there was no consensus. It was like 6, 7, 8. I'm not sure. It was not clear. It was not like a rule that was set. But in Russia, it is a rule and it is a certain guideline because I think it's kind of like the aftermath of the Soviet Union where there were a lot of clear rules because everything was done from the state. And you didn't have a lot of leeway to when you want to do it. It was kind of told to you, you should do this, that, and the third. So today, let's talk about the whole educational system from the kindergarten to the university and all the unknown things, all the details about it. So first, kindergarten, детский сад. Детский сад actually means kid garden, okay? So the same thing as in English, maybe German, maybe kindergarten is German, I don't know. So you go to kindergarten at the age of 3. Some places allow for smaller kids, but that's that's not super frequent. So you go at the age of 3 if your parents want to do that. They are not obligated to use the services of a kindergarten, but a lot of them are free or at a very low cost. I would say a range between 1,500 rubles to 4,500 rubles, depending on the region. So even in the most expensive region, you'll pay about 45, 50 bucks for your kid to be in kindergarten. And typically the hours are in the morning, like maybe from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., things like that. So it's a huge help for a lot of parents who maybe are single parents or when both parents work. It's a very common situation where both parents work in Russia. And in my family, there's 3 of us, me, my brother, and my sister. All of us went to the same kindergarten, okay? All of us. Now, my parents had my grandma next to us. They had all kinds of help that they would need. My mom didn't really need to work. She wanted to work. And so they decided to put us in детский сад, and we loved it. I still have friends that I met at that kindergarten, still friends to this day, because we also went to school together and things like that. So it's a place where a lot of kids come together. We learn certain things, we play, we socialize. It's a great place, I think, for kids to get to know other kids and things like that. These days, there's a lot of private kindergartens too. For example, I lived in an apartment, and downstairs at the first level, there was a kindergarten that was not municipal, that was not from the government, that was a private one. And I'm sure that the price there is way higher than just 50 bucks. And those typically have better workers there. Maybe they have certain educational things. Sometimes they would have English speaking kindergartens so that your kid can practice English at a very young age. So there's a ton of different ones these days, but there were not a ton when I was growing up. Now, of course, especially in the bigger cities, Moscow, my city, Novosibirsk, and St. Petersburg, and things like that. Once you finish kindergarten at the age of 6 or 7, typically at the age of 7, you go to school. Now, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, depending on the development of the kid. I went to school, for example, when I was 6. So I went a year earlier because my parents were coming to the kindergarten for the next year enrollment, and the teachers there said, don't do it, go to school. Your kid is developed enough for him to study in school. So I was like a very smart kid. So I went to school 1 year earlier. My siblings went to school very regular at 7, nothing special there. Sometimes you go to school at 8 if you have trouble with, social skills or learning skills. You can go a bit later too. But the baseline, 99.9% of kids go to school when they're 7 years old. And school in Russia is школа. And here how it's set up. First 4 years, начальная школа, which is the elementary school. Then you have средние классы, from the grade 5 to 9. And then you have старшие классы, the grades 10 and 11. Let's talk about each. You start with начальная школа. So you first enroll in school. You are assigned a certain class. Okay? Let's say первый А, which means first A. There is первый Б, первый В, первый Г. They're typically divided into the amount of kids that each class can hold, like 25 kids. So if, let's say, in this year, the enrollment of 100 kids came to the school, they're all divided in those kind of groups. I was in первый Б, first B. So you have your group of kids that you learn together for the whole year. You don't get transferred from other classes. You have your group for the rest of your school time, from the first grade to the 9th grade. The group does not change, unless, of course, a certain kid moves to a different region or changes schools. That can happen. But if nothing changes, you have the same group from start to finish. Very different from other countries, where you simply select your class and then you can get mixed up with other kids. No, in Russia, you have your group and you stay with them for the rest of your school time. Elementary school, you have your classroom assigned to you as well. That's called also class. Class is also your class, like the group of kids, but class is also the room. And different teachers come to you to teach. You don't ever move. You sit in the same place and they come to you. You have maybe математика, литература, русский язык, естествознание, and some other ones like физкультура, things like that. Very basic things. There's no sciences yet like physics and chemistry and biology and things like that. Typically, it's like more beginner kind of classes. So once you finish your school, your elementary school, typically at the end of that, you have a little party with the parents and all of that. Then you start средние классы, which is like middle school, okay? From 5th grade to the 9th grade. The only thing that's different now is that you no longer sit in one room. Not the teachers don't move anymore. You move to the teachers, okay? You go to different classrooms. Math is in this classroom. Then the next class is physics. You go here. But again, you and your whole group, the whole class, you have the same schedule from Monday to Saturday. By the way, we study from Monday to Saturday, not Monday through Friday. So you have a certain order of classes, the whole group. You as an individual don't choose that. So you as a whole group go from one place to another, to the third, to the fourth. Different subjects, different classrooms. And that's really the only thing that's different. And what's very interesting about this средние классы, the middle school, is that all kids, all across Russia, learn the same thing. Sometimes certain regional modifications are made, but the whole curriculum is established on the country level, on the national level. So I can study something in Siberia. Meanwhile, a kid in Moscow is studying the same thing, which is something, again, aftermath of the Soviet Union. It just stayed like that. I think it's a great benefit to that because you can relate to kids all over the country, that you don't have as many barriers in communication, in understanding them, in their upbringing, in your upbringing. You learn the same thing, so you kind of already know each other. And what's even funnier than that, what's even more interesting than that, I hear a lot of stories that happen in schools that were the exact same as ours. The way we acted a fool at school, the way we argued with teachers, the way what we did after school. Like, let's say in my school, a lot of kids smoked. So it's like the whole smoking, sneaking out and smoking things are the same between the kids in my school and the kids in a whole different part of the country. So a lot of even around the school things were happening at the same time. So it was a very big surprise for me to find out that I'm not that different from people from Moscow, from Vladivostok, all over the country. They're all pretty much the same. We have a lot of similarities that we share. We watch the same cartoons, we studied the same materials, we knew the same words, we used the same social media, we even bought the same groceries. Like if, let's say, me and my buddies after school wanted to play some soccer, football, after that we go to a store and we buy lemonade, tarhun, like a similar, like a grass flavor to it, колокольчик, more like a clear soda, and maybe what else, дюшес. And kids in other parts of Russia bought the same things, which was very surprising to me. And it really makes you connect to other people much easier because you had the same childhood pretty much. It feels like you grew up right beside them, even if you didn't. So I really appreciate that fact about the Russian upbringing, about our Russian educational system, things like that. So back to our school, okay? Now let's move on to the старшая школа. Старшая школа means high school. Only 2 grades, 10th and 11th. Not all kids go to старшая школа. If you want to eventually go to a university, you stay in school for 2 more years. So старшая школа is only for those who aim to go to a university. Well, you may ask, well, what if you don't want to aim for university? What if you just want to be done with this school education? You can leave after the 9th grade and you go to something called college. College is typically something like a manual labor school, like a sewing school, cooking school, culinary school, maybe an electrician, maybe a railroad worker, things like that. It's a very specialized entity where you receive your education for a specific job, very specific job. So a lot of jobs that, like I said, manual labor are that. And you study for 4 years in that college. After you graduate, you have your specialized degree. You have a specialized degree in a certain profession. Now you can go ahead and work that job for the rest of your life if you want to. So that's college. Back to school. Старшая школа. Старшая школа is just 2 more years of school that is the same exact thing as the one before, the middle school. Same exact thing. Nothing changes. No new classes are added. Nothing is changed at all. So it's just simply kids, like half the kids leave to get that special education. Half the kids stay to continue their schoolwork. After you're done with school, with старшая школа, 11 grades. You have studied in school for 11 years. Not 10, not 12, 11. All kids do that. There's no variation between, like I said, different regions. All schools have that. So you study in school for 11 years. Typically, you are 18 when you graduate. Now it's time for you to go to a university. How do you go from school to university? How does a university select different kids? We have something called ЕГЭ. ЕГЭ is standardized state exam. Think of your SATs. But what's different about them is that there is different subjects. And why do we have that system? Well, because depending on your potential major, you will be required to take one subject or another. 2 subjects that all the kids take, it's mandatory. Русский and математика. If you go to a medical school, physics, computer science, doesn't matter, you still take those 2. And then, let's say if you're going to go study economics, you'll be required to take обществознание as your exam. If you go into a physics school, you of course are required to take физика. So depending on your major, you take whatever exam you want or choose to take, depending on what they will require of you. And each of these tests is a maximum of 100 points. So let's say you have a cumulative of 250, and then you go take your documents to apply to a certain university. And their bar is not 250, but 260. Sorry, you cannot be accepted. So you get rejected. So you go to a university with lower scores, lower acceptance scores, like 240. And you take your documents there, you apply there. You may be accepted. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. You have a certain merit that everybody is judged by, and then different universities have lower or higher standards depending on their prestige level, depending on some accomplishments. Some universities that are more famous, they're typically, of course, have higher standards because they have like thousands of kids applying. They can only take like 100. So, of course, they're going to increase the lower kind of barrier of entry. So that's how it works. Once you get into university, there's 4 years that you study for 4 years, different structures depending on the university. Now, different schools have different structures, different majors, all of that is different. Each university is unique. And to talk about the whole financial structure of school and university, school is 100% free. You don't pay a dime when you go to school. Sometimes, however, let's say a certain class will ask parents to pitch in for maybe new blinds, maybe like $10 each, maybe $20 each for a year. It's very, very minimal. But for the actual education, you don't have to pay anything, nothing. So you can just go to school for free and get your education. Then once you get to university, that's when you might have to pay. The reason why I say might, is because we have scholarships. Unlike in the US, scholarships are not private, they're government scholarships. So, depending on your scores of those tests, let's say if you scored 100 on all of your tests, you will be given a scholarship. So, a kid, potentially from a poor family, who cannot afford to pay for their university, they have this motivation to study hard and to take exams and to get a great grade on those exams just to be in university. There is an opportunity to just study for free. You don't have to pay anything if you're smart. If you don't get in for free, the cost is not that high. Maybe right now it will be like 200,000 rubles on average, which is, as you can see, the conversion rate on the screen. It's not a lot for like per year. Of course, depending on the family, to some it's impossible to pay that. Some can afford that. But it's definitely not 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 a year like it is, let's say, in the US, where I studied. So it's way more affordable, even if you don't get in for free, even if you don't get that scholarship. And that's kind of how it works. In university, you have 4 years of bachelor, 6 years of master's, same thing as in other countries too, because I think they might have to have a certain standard across the countries. I think that it's not just like a Russian system, that it's the system all across the world, I believe. So university is a very similar structure to other countries. And that's how education works. Of course, I'm not going in like all the detail possible, all the small intricacies. If you're interested in something more specific, ask your follow-up questions in the comments. Maybe the next episode, we can dive deeper into those questions and, I'll answer some of them. That's how it works. The reason why it's very important for you guys to know this is because it helps you relate to Russians much easier. If you know what kind of structure they go through, you will understand them better. You will understand why, let's say, people from, like I said, from different regions can find a lot more in common with each other than in other countries. Now you know that. Now you know how it goes from like elementary school, middle school, and things like that. So it's easier for you to relate to them. And now let's move on to the vocabulary for this episode. We have 10 words. 5 simple ones when it comes to education, and 5 that are a bit more complicated. So the easy ones are школа. Школа is school. Школа. Урок is a lesson. Урок. In fact, урок, it can be жизненный урок, life lesson, not just like a lesson in school. Учебник is a textbook. Учебник. Задание is assignment. Задание. And let's take this word and talk about pronunciation a bit. Задание. In Russian, vowels play a bigger role than they do in English. We have to open up our mouth more. In English, we can just kind of go like this and it's going to be okay. People will understand what I'm saying. I don't have to open my mouth at all. I can just mumble like this. In Russian, it's not possible. We have to open up our mouth a bit more on certain vowels. So today, let's take a look at this ah. I'll zoom in so you can see the enunciation of it. The ah sound, the mouth is opened up a lot. Ah, ah. Now let's practice this a little bit. We will exaggerate the pronunciation so we can then say it easier in a sentence. Ah. So задание, задание. You open up your mouth more. What I see a lot of learners, the mistake that they make is just saying задание, задание. Not even open up their mouth. Задание. Make sure that you open up your mouth on the ah sounds. Ah is one of the main sounds in Russian. It creates this flow of a sentence. So задание. Okay? So next time you read a text, make sure that you have ah in there. Don't just say задание. People will not understand what you say. Okay? So back to the words. Задание is an assignment or homework. Оценка is a grade. And see how I said оценка. Not just like оценка, оценка. Оценка, a grade. Образование. Образование is education. It can be either educational system, the whole thing in general, образование. It can be your education, образование. Again, notice how many us we have here. Образование, okay? A lot of us here. Аттестат. Аттестат is a school diploma. Аттестат is a middle school diploma. Аттестат. Абитуриент is university applicant. Абитуриент. Абитуриент, I think, is either just a regular student, or sometimes it's a person who applies for a higher level of education, like master's, candidate, and things like that. So, абитуриент. Гуманитарий is a person who studies humanitarian studies, like let's say like a liberal arts person, okay? Гуманитарий. And гуманитарий is not just unique to educational system. Гуманитарий is a type of thinking. Like you're not an exact science guy, but you're more liberal arts kind of a guy. Literature, language, things like that. So we have this distinction in Russia where if you say "Я гуманитарий," I'm a humanitarian, I'm a liberal arts person. I get those subjects better than math, physics, chemistry. So гуманитарий. And диссертация, I think you know what it means. Диссертация, which means a dissertation or a thesis. Диссертация. That is all. And this vocabulary list is brought to you by Be Fluent. Speak Russian to your family and friends. Have fun as you speak. And don't make silly mistakes anymore. Check it out with the first link in the description. We have a 7-day free trial. Here's an example. Right here is a vocabulary studying page where you practice the words that you previously add to your vocabulary. You practice them to never forget them in the long term. Besides the vocabulary page, we have Russian step by step. It's our all-inclusive Russian course when it comes to grammar, when it comes to speaking, listening, all of that. Practice that and do speak to your family and friends with no issues. Check it out with the first link in the description. And now let's move on to our next part of the show, is talking about how important grammar truly is, if it's important at all. Maybe it's not. Let's talk about how to best approach grammar. We have covered overall Russian learning from start to finish. We have covered vocabulary in the previous episode. Now let's cover grammar. Grammar is something that no student can escape. In fact, a lot of people overdo grammar, giving it too much credit, because the reason for that, and I blame our schooling system for that, the reason why a lot of students learn grammar is not because it's easier for the student. It's not because it's better for the student. It's because it's easier for the teacher. Think about it. Let's say you have 50 kids in the classroom. What's going to be easier for you as a teacher to do? Give them a short quiz of grammar where there's a clear right or wrong answer, or teach them to speak that language. And then you have to speak to every single person, and it's more subjective to where you don't know who speaks better than the other. There's no clear better or right or wrong there. Of course, as a teacher, you would go for the first. You would give them a quiz and grade it easily. You might even have to, you might even do it with a computer. You don't have to do it yourself even. So grammar is taught heavily because it's easier for the teacher to track the progress of their kids and to create this false progression, false growth in the language, which I really urge you guys to stay away from. That gets carried over to our independent learning, to you guys right now learning Russian. It gets carried over because it's our habit. So grammar is not as important as a lot of students make it out to be. However, it still is important. It's not something that we can just forget about. Like this viral video right here talking about that the Russian grammar is kind of useless and you don't even need it. I disagree with this video. I partially agree, partially disagree. Put it that way. There's an over-obsession with grammar to where you learn only grammar until you can speak Russian. That's impossible. And we have covered vocabulary in the previous lesson to where half of your time should be spent on vocabulary. That still is true. Then you spend maybe 10% of your time, 50% of vocabulary, 10% of your time on grammar. just to learn the basic things like sentence structure, basic grammar topics, because sometimes it's easier to learn grammar for like 10 minutes than trying to figure out the pattern from just speaking. If you have a verb играть, it's easier and faster to learn that a prefix is something like выиграть. Вы as a prefix added a meaning of to win. Pro added a meaning of to lose. So проиграть means to lose. It's easier for me to explain this to you in a grammatical lesson than you trying to figure it out from context. I think it's also a misconception that you only need to speak and things will come to you. I disagree. Because we are grown people, we have our logical thinking developed, we can learn about logical grammatical things and save our learning time that way. So, considering those two things, over obsession, but still there's a need for grammar, how do we go about learning the Russian grammar? I will give you an exact step-by-step of all grammar rules that you need to learn. But before that, let's talk about what's the approach? What's the philosophy of it? My philosophy of grammar learning is only learn the things that you feel the need to learn. If you find yourself meeting the same word or the same pattern of text, you see in Russian, okay, the endings change a whole lot. Why do they change? So you type in Google, why do endings change? And then you find the grammar rules that are associated with that. So you notice a certain pattern that you cannot figure out. Then you type in Google search or ChatGPT or whatever it is to find the answers. Don't just go and take a book off the shelf and learn all the grammar rules that are in that book. Because truth is, you will need maybe like half of those things half of the time. So it's not going to be the most efficient time. Only learn the grammar rules that you stumble upon. It really stems from your conversation and your usage. That's my philosophy of language learning. That's my philosophy of Russian teaching here, is that you only learn the things that you need for your communication. So here's the list of what you should learn. And this will be kind of like your blueprint. If you want to spend time studying grammar, this is your step-by-step. Number 1, word order. Think about that. What does that mean in Russian? Look it up if it really matters or not. Word order. Then you learn verb conjugation. It's when the verbs change their ending depending on who is speaking. That's conjugation. Then you learn past tense in the verbs and then future tense. Within this topic, you will also learn aspects on a small level, on like a low level of comprehension, aspects. With that, also, you will learn prefixes. Prefixes stem from aspects as well, but there is a lot of complexity to prefixes. You may not want to learn the whole topic of prefixes, but some part of it. And because a lot of Russian grammar is also practical, and prefixes and aspects is a very practical part of it, to where you have to practice to really use it well. Then learn cases. Cases would be your final topic to learn for 99.9% of all conversations in Russian. And that would be it. Those are the most crucial topics to learn. There is a ton more topics, and those would be resort to those only when you need them, when the need arises. There's a ton. Reflexive verbs, verbs of motion. There is imperative forms. There is modal verbs. There is numerals. There's a ton of different things that you will learn when you need to do that. Grammar is important. Grammar helps us structure our speech. It gives it more foundation versus just like saying whatever words we want. We want to structure them well so that the listener will understand this precisely. So they don't have to figure out which grammar rule you don't know to make up for the lack of meaning. Okay? That is all. That's the grammar. Grammar is key, but don't over obsess over grammar. Now let's move on to the listening part of this episode. In the first episode, we had English and Russian subtitles. In the last one, we had Russian. Today, we won't have anything. Okay? My goal to all of you is just listen. You will not understand a lot. You might understand some, but you won't understand a lot. But just listen and see what you can pick out. You will listen to the flow of the speech, not the words themselves. And your listening will be trained to understand the flow. And maybe you can copy the flow. Maybe you can copy the way I speak as well, because I'm a native. So it's beneficial for you to listen to how I talk, to copy the way I talk too. So don't obsess over the meaning of this monologue. Just listen to train your ear. I'll be talking about my education in Russian. So here we go. Я, как и многие дети, пошел в детский сад в раннем возрасте. Мне нравилось в детском саду, потому что там было весело. Также в детском саду был мой брат. И я всегда знал, что если у меня будут проблемы, я могу прийти к нему. Это мой старший брат, и если что, он мне поможет. После детского сада я пошел в школу. Я пошел в школу, когда мне было 6 лет. На год раньше. В школе мне тоже всегда все нравилось. Я без проблем влился в коллектив, нашел друзей, и пошла моя жизнь в школе. В начальных классах мне нравилась наша классная руководительница, она была очень добрая. Затем, разумеется, началась средняя школа, средние классы. И там уже было поинтересней. Там уже у нас было гораздо больше свободы. И я с моими друзьями, мы начали хулиганить. Мы начали делать всякую ерунду, покупали конфеты, продавали конфеты в школе, играли в футбол после уроков и делали вообще много плохих вещей. Но было очень весело. Я до сих пор вспоминаю то время с улыбкой. Затем наступили старшие классы. Там уже было менее весело, потому что почти все мои друзья ушли. Переехали в другие города, пошли в другие школы, пошли в колледжи и так далее. Было уже более скучно. Но это то время, когда у меня начались какие-то серьезные отношения с девушками. Это тоже была интересная часть моей жизни. Затем, после старшей школы, я поступил в университет в Америке. Я учился 5 лет в Америке и получил магистра бизнес-администрирования, MBA, если коротко. Конечно, это было мое основное время взросления. Мне все нравилось в университете, я играл в теннис, все было здорово, и я также познакомился с моей женой в университете. Вот краткая история моего образования. That is all. Hope you understood at least 1%, like 5 words of what I said, and that will be more than enough for this task. See you all over at Be Fluent, study up, and get to understand this monologue better with Be Fluent, or keep on watching our YouTube videos with this next one. It's